friends, welcome back to Big Bill Anderson's Death Tours. This is a very special location today for several reasons. First of all, it's Father's Day. It's the 16th of June. I'm with my son Audie, who's videotaping this right now, which makes it an extremely special day for me. But also, I'm here to pay my respects to a man that I was in the ring with on a couple of occasions, a man that left us many years too soon. He was only 33 years old when he died in a traffic accident in Newfoundland, Canada. I am here at the grave site of a man that I'd like to say was my friend, one of the legends of professional wrestling, Adrian Adonis. I'm at the Bakersfield Cemetery here to pay my respects to Adrian. He was a good man, hell of a wrestler, and I'm going to tell you more about his story with some personal stories of my wrestling, Adrian Adonis. Stay tuned, my friends.
Keith A. Frank was born on September 15th, 1954, in Buffalo, New York. He was the second son of wrestling manager Keith A. Frank Sr. and mother Dolores Frank. Frank trained under Fred Atkins and debuted in 1974, wrestling under his real name. In the late 1970s, he adapted the ring name Adrian Adonis and the character of a brawling, leather-clad biker. He joined the American Wrestling Association in 1979 and formed a tag team with future Minnesota Governor Jesse the Body Ventura. The team was called the East-West Connection. They were awarded the AWA World Tag Team Championship on July 20th, 1980, when Vern Gagne, one half of the tag champions with Mad Dog Vachon, was unable to defend the belts. They held the belts until June 14, 1981, when they were defeated by Greg Gagne and Jim Brunzell. Adonis and Ventura debuted in the World Wrestling Federation in late 1981, working both as a team and in singles matches. Adonis was a frequent challenger of WWF champion Bob Backlund and Intercontinental Champion Pedro Morales throughout the first half of 1982. Vince McMahon had expanded his World Wrestling Federation promotion across the country in the early 1980s, and 1983 was the beginning of their expansion in the California area, which gave me personally a chance to wrestle for that organization as I was based out of Los Angeles at the time. I wrestled several shows a month during the mid 1980s for the WWF. And I wrestled Adrian for the first time at the San Diego Sports Arena in front of about 8,000 fans on August 28th, 1983. About 10 minutes into what I considered a routine match, Adrian kicked me between the legs very hard. As I doubled over in pain, he punched me as hard as he could right in the mouth. Blood was pouring out from somewhere. At the time, I really couldn't tell where. I was worried that a couple of my teeth had gotten knocked out, so I rolled out of the ring to kind of collect my thoughts. I felt my face with my hand to see if I could feel anything out of the ordinary, and my whole face was completely numb. Ironically, the fans at ringside started yelling that the blood was all fake, and even though it was just dripping and pouring from my mouth and nose area. And for the record, fans and friends, the blood in wrestling is very, very real. I got back in the ring a couple minutes later, and Adrian pinned me. I had to go straight to the hospital that night and have a plastic surgeon put 27 stitches on the inside and outside of my lip, right directly under my nose. I'm lucky it didn't split my lip completely. I spent 4 hours at the San Diego hospital that night before I could leave and drive all the way back to Los Angeles where I lived. The next night, I wrestled at the Los Angeles Sports Arena in front of about 10,000 fans. My face was very swollen, but I couldn't afford to miss a show during those years. And I found out later that Adrian was using drugs the night I faced him and was not himself, according to others that knew him better. I healed up and life went on. I also discovered later that Adrian was known somewhat of a bully in the ring. I believe I was a recipient of that attitude in my San Diego match. But I loved my job as a wrestler and never complained to the higher ups in the organization. It was a tough sport and I knew what I was getting into when I started. I was in the ring again with Adrian on January 28th, 1984 at the Olympic Auditorium in front of, again, over 10,000 fans. The main event that night was a battle royal. There were 20 wrestlers in the battle royal. I was one of those participants, as was Adrian Adonis. Some of the other key people in the ring that night was Andre the Giant, Pat Patterson, the Iron Sheik, Mil Mascaras, Tony Atlas, Tito Santana, Sergeant Slaughter, and John Tolis. And luckily, I didn't have much interaction with Adrian that night. I will show you a picture from the Battle Royal here. Adonis formed a tag team with Dick Murdoch called the North and South Connection, which debuted in late 1983. Around this time, Adonis, who had previously been a muscular, stocky, and well-conditioned wrestler, gained a considerable amount of weight. And on April 17, 1984, Adonis and Murdoch defeated Tony Atlas and Rocky Johnson to win the WWF Tag Team Championship. They held the title until January 21st, 1985, when they were defeated by Barry Windham and Mike Rotunda. Then on December 11th, 1985, I was booked to wrestle at the Los Angeles Sports Arena. I showed up that night and looked at the lineup sheet, and I have to admit I rolled my eyes because I saw on there Billy Anderson versus Adrian Adonis. After I put my wrestling boots on, I went over to Adrian's dressing room to say hello to him and his manager, Bobby the Brain Heenan. I discovered Adrian was so drunk that he could barely speak. I told him that we were wrestling each other that night, and he said, "Good, I'm going to kill you." He then laid down on the floor, and before I could even leave the dressing room, I could hear him snoring. He was out like a light. Wow, I sure didn't expect that response. Again, as I later learned, during this time period, Adrian was battling with some addictions. Our match that night was very, very brief, with Adrian delivering an elbow from the top rope onto my chest and then the pin. I did not get hurt that night, and in retrospect, it could have been much worse. In late 1985, Adonis, his gimmick began to change. During an edition of Piper's Pit, Adrian gave his signature leather jacket away to host Roddy Piper, who wore it for years afterwards. Adonis then adopted the gimmick of an effeminate, adorable Adrian Adonis, bleaching his hair blonde and wearing pink ring attire, as well as scarves, leg warmers, dresses, hats, and clownish amounts of eyeshadow and rouge. At this time, his weight further ballooned, peaking at over 350 pounds. He also ceased his prior weightlifting regime, stopped tanning, and he did still contain considerable athleticism and agility in the ring for a big man. He had a running feud with the Junkyard Dog and George the Animal Steele, while unsuccessfully challenging Hulk Hogan for the WWF Championship on multiple occasions. Adrian wrestled Roddy Piper on March 29, 1987 in a hair versus hair match at WrestleMania 3 in front of over 93,000 fans at the Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan. Just 6 weeks later, Adrian was fired from the World Wrestling Federation. Now with a shaved head, he returned to the AWA, where he was managed by Paulie Dangerously. He maintained his adorable Adrian Adonis gimmick, feuded with Tommy Rich, and lost the final match of the AWA International Television Championship tournament to Greg Gagne in December of 1987. In March of 1988, I auditioned for a Mountain Dew television commercial in Hollywood and saw Adrian in the office also trying out for the part. We talked for several minutes. He looked great, having lost considerable weight. Former wrestling manager and fellow Bakersfield resident Bobby Davis had been helping Adrian get back on track to lose weight. Adrian told me that he would be starting back in the WWF later that year. It was the best I'd ever seen Adrian look or sound. He seemed very happy with life. Adrian wrestled on a tour of New Japan throughout May and June of 1988, and during that tour he teamed with Dick Murdoch and Owen Hart. On June 23rd, he and Murdoch unsuccessfully challenged Riki Choshu and Masa Saito for the IWGP Tag Team Championship. On July 4th, 1988, in Lewisport, Newfoundland, Canada, Adrian was in a minivan with fellow wrestlers, the Kelly twins, Pat and Mike, real names Victor and William Arco, and the Bearman, Dave McKigney. Adonis, who was 33 years old, Bearman, 56 years old, and Pat Kelly, 40 years old, were killed when the driver, Mike Kelly, swerved to avoid hitting a moose and was blinded by the setting sun. Their van fell from a bridge over Neils Brook Creek below. Adrian suffered severe head injuries and died a few hours later. Mike Kelly was the sole survivor and sustained severe leg injuries, never to wrestle again. The wrestlers were en route from Gander, Newfoundland, to an engagement in Lewisport. Lewisport is on the northern coast of Newfoundland. The accident occurred around 9:30 p.m., but the sun was still shining because Newfoundland was on double daylight savings time. At the time of his death, he left behind his wife Bea and two daughters here in Bakersfield, California. Adrian Adonis was scheduled to appear for Walter Killer Kowalski's wrestling shows in Massachusetts after he finished up with the Bearman's promotion. Kowalski had no problem finding someone to take Adrian's place on those shows. However, he sent the payoff that Adrian would have been paid for those 3 shows to Adrian's widow. Very rare for a wrestling promoter to do something like that, but Walter Killer Kowalski was a great-hearted person and just that kind of guy. During Adrian's wrestling career, he held the AWA World Tag Team Championship one time with Jesse Ventura, the NWA America's Heavyweight Championship, the NWA America's Tag Team Championship 2 times with Rowdy Roddy Piper and Black Gordman. He held the Pacific Northwest Tag Team Championship with Ron Starr. He held the Southwest Championship Wrestling Heavyweight Championship 1 time, the Southwest Wrestling World Heavyweight Championship 1 time, and the World Wrestling Federation World Tag Team Championship 1 time with Dick Murdoch. And I can tell you from the bottom of my heart, it truly saddens me to stand at Adrian's grave here at Green Lawn Memorial Park on Father's Day, June 16th, 2019. I had a tremendous amount of respect for the wrestlers that were in that fatal car accident on July 4th, 1988. Despite any injuries I incurred wrestling Adrian back in 1983, I was then, as I am now, honored to have been good enough to be put into the same ring with Adrian Adonis for the World Wrestling Federation. By all accounts, Adrian was a great father to his 2 daughters, a great husband to his wife Bea, and a great provider for his family. So, Adrian, with a tear in my eye, I say, rest in peace, my friend.
Adrian Adonis was one of the most colorful performers in professional wrestling, familiar to fans both for his outlandish appearance and his tremendous agility as a big man. But his career came to a sudden bizarre end here in Newfoundland when the van he was traveling in swerved to miss a moose that was blocking the road. The van plunged off a cliff, killing Adonis and 2 other wrestlers instantly. Left behind in Bakersfield, California, are Adonis's wife and 2 children.
Listen. He loved it. I mean, that was his life. He trained for it. He worked hard. He wanted to be on top. He was on top. He went through hell to get there, but he made it.
Adonis was a flamboyant character, always sure of himself.
If you're looking at him right here, right now, the best personality right now in professional wrestling. I have to admit, I'm not trying to brag, it's just fact.
But he adopted the gimmick of wrestling in drag, and some observers say it cost him his career.
He finally went back to Japan, totally devoid of the gay gimmick. He had never done that gimmick in Japan, and he had been a big star in Japan before. He was starting to make a comeback, and he might have done fairly well there. As far as North America, he really would have had a tough time living down the gimmick.
His trainer, Bobby Davis, says he was making a comeback.
In the 6 months before he passed away, Adrian trained twice a day, 2 hours a day at Gold's Gym, trained off 127 pounds, an unbelievable dedication.
I know he's gone now, and, you know, we all go, but he was just too, it's unbelievable still.